Good afternoon, grade 8 journalists, and I hope that you're all ready to learn about editorial writing this afternoon. I just have one quick question for you all. What comes to mind when you think about editorial writing? I think and I bet you think about opinion or arguments or persuasion, and you are right in thinking these things. The important thing here is being able to arrange them structurally so that you can get your point across. Now, let's examine these structures that I'm talking about. First, my dear journalists, we have here the basic structure of any writing you'll ever encounter. Introduction, followed by the supporting paragraphs, and the conclusion. Now, as we look into each structure closely, we're going to examine that through the lens of our required reading, Real Call, written by Rod Hagen Makabuwag in 2018. So please open your textbooks to page 276 to 277. Here, you can find the introduction. And in our introduction, there are two important parts. First is the stance. In other words, stance is your opinion. In our required reading, the stance is stated in paragraph 1, sentence 1. And as responsible journalists, I'm going to give it to you as your job to read the specific sentence. Now, what about the news peg, teacher? What is a news peg? The newsbag answers the question, what are you talking about? Basically, it's about what your article or what issue are you rooting from? Are you talking about in your editorial? Now, in our real call, our required reading, the newsbag speaks of how journalism is supposed to be a watchdog, but in reality, it becomes a lapdog. And you can find it in paragraph 1, sentence number 4. Let's go visit the supporting paragraph. Here, the support or the second structure of our editorial article is 2 to 3 paragraphs long, the supporting paragraphs. You can find here your arguments, counter arguments, and the evidence. So arguments are basically your perspective, your opinion, and you can find an example in paragraph 2, sentence 1 of Real Call. Now, if you can present your opinion, you should also be able to take the opinion that's opposite yours and destroy it and demolish it with facts and evidence. That is what we call an opposition, a refutation, or counter arguments. You can find an example in paragraph 3, sentence 3 of our required reading. Now, if you have your point and the point that's opposite yours, you must be able to present also your evidence. And in our required reading, there are two pieces of evidence presented. One about Mocha Uson and the second about Leila de Lima. And you can also find it in paragraph 1 and 3 respectively. So you go check that out, my dear journalists. Now, it's time to visit our last part, the last part of our structure called the conclusion. In the conclusion, you present the summary. And this isn't just about reiterating your points, okay? This is also about reminding your readers why they must care about your issue or the issue that you're writing about. So here you can find the highlighted statement there. May the journalists never waver, which is a direct callback to the introduction, the stance that we stated in the introduction. Now, what about the underlined sentences or statements? A simple fact check before resharing, teach and lead them back in becoming loyal and faithful to the journalist's creed. These are reminders to our readers that they need to care. So now that you're familiar with the structure of an editorial, you may be asking, teacher, are all editorial articles the same? Do they fulfill the same purposes? The quick answer is no. Here, you can find 3 types of editorial. There's one that evaluates, and if an editorial evaluates, you focus on the actions. another that persuades. And if it persuades, you focus on solutions, and another that explains. And if you explain, you focus on facts. Let's look closely at each type. First, we begin with editorial article that evaluates. What does an evaluative editorial article do? Again, we focus on the action, and we can do this in two ways. First is to criticize. Now, when you criticize something, you have to be constructive, meaning you don't just point out what is wrong. You also offer alternative actions to improve whatever it is that you are criticizing. And the second way is to praise. Now, if you praise, you have to be reasonable. You can't just write an editorial that evaluates by praising because the politician is good looking or because this organization is famous. For example, you watched this episode of It's Showtime where the hosts contributed money to distribute 1 million to the victims of the Typhoon Tino here in Cebu. That's reason to write an editorial that praises. Now, the example, our required reading Real Call, is an example of an editorial that evaluates because it criticizes the current situation of journalism, and it also offers alternative actions like the simple fact checking and also the leading and teaching back the journalists to being loyal to the journalist creed. Let's go visit the second type. Now here, you can find the editorial that persuades. Here you might find it the same with evaluates, not the same, but similar with the one that evaluates, because we give something more than just facts. But what makes them different is that for evaluates, you focus on actions, but for persuades, you focus on solutions that are specific and immediate. Immediate meaning now. We need the solution now. The example is, you can find it in the Philippine Daily Inquirer titled Reliable Power for Island Provinces. And of course, this is a separate attachment for your supplementary reading after our class. Now, let's take a look at the last type of editorial called the editorial that explains. When we talk about this type of editorial, you focus on facts. And teacher, didn't you say that editorials present your opinion? Yes, that's right. That's true. But the opinion here stems from how we interpret the facts. So for editorial that explains, you inform and you interpret the facts. And an example is An Unfinished Revolution by Philippine Daily Inquirer. And this is also a supplementary reading for you after our class. Now, you are already well versed in the structures and types of editorial writing. It's time for you to be familiar with the qualities. What makes journalists say that this article is a good quality editorial? My dear journalists, I want you to remember the mnemonics CUP CUT. Again, CUP CUT. CUP CUT stands for complete, meaning the introduction, the supporting paragraphs, and the conclusion are all there, are all good. Next, opposition. The counter arguments, the refutations, you include them also in your editorial. And then the next letter for P, proactive. And that means you provide more than just facts. You give alternative actions or specific solutions. And then the next one is for professional. You establish a boundary between you, your article, and your subject. There is no name calling in editorial writing. Next one is C for concise. Editorial writing is not a wheel that goes round and round and round. You have to get your point across, say it directly, and give evidence. Next one is objective. In editorial writing, it's important not to say, I think, I believe, in my opinion, in my perspective. You have to be objective. You have to be sure all the time. And letter T for our last letter in the mnemonic for timely. You can't write about something that happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, unless those issues still have an effect to the present time. When you write an editorial, you think about what affects and what matters today. Now that you're all familiar with the structure, types, and the qualities of a good editorial article, I want you to remember always that as journalists, you must never waver. If you have questions, my dear journalists, we'll take it in our discussion.